tell us about the bill it affects everybody in here. It affects Charlie probably of everybody in here more than anybody else since he's representing the high school league. So just the background and just what it actually says.
Well, it's really an interesting bill. When I was speaker and actually kept up with bills, we would always get legislation involving the high school league. Generally, every year it'd be 4, 5, or 6 pieces of legislation a year. Some parent in some individual's district felt aggrieved about high school league decision, and they would file a piece of legislation to try to change the high school league. I think the high school league is a little different in that most of the things in South Carolina the legislature controls. I don't think I'm saying anything out of school there. We're a strong legislative state. When I taught constitutional law in the Honors College, you go back and you go back to the foundation of South Carolina, you learn immediately that we never had much liking for a king. So the governor has not a lot of power in South Carolina. He'll admit that. So most of the power in this state is with the legislature. The high school league is kind of a different animal. The legislature has some control, as does the superintendent of education, over schools. The high school league really doesn't have any control over the South Carolina high school league. I always thought it was really neat to go to appeals when I had constituents say, well, McBee High we call. I always loved McBee High School. It's a great little school. Some years, God bless them, they have 13, 14 kids on the sideline, and they'd have a kid that was maybe 2 days past being able to play his senior year. Weighed 135 pounds. Probably couldn't knock a roll of toilet paper off the toilet seat if it was soaking wet, and we'd go over there and we'd get denied. So one of the things about the high school league I really liked was the rules were the rules, and they enforced the rules. This new body that they're talking about creating would be, I don't want to say state agency, although the statute uses that term, but it would be something akin to a state agency. Probably you would call it an eleemosynary corporation. The catch with it is that the appointments to the corporation would now be done not from the bottom up by schools creating creating a high school league to run high school sports in South Carolina. But now it becomes a top-down organization where the people who are running it will be appointed by a number of people who are, at the end of the day, all elected. I believe superintendent of education gets an appointment. A lot of people get different appointments. The one thing that those people have in common is that they are elected. So, I will say this in front of camera, I'm certainly not naive when you have political appointments on eleemosynary corporations or agencies. Those things, tend to sometimes get political. Now, why is this happening? I don't know if I want to, Coach, I'll go into that and talk about that, but this is going to be a long conversation, and I don't want to dominate everybody's time. I know they'll have questions. I know why it's happening. I know why I think that this is trying to be done, and just the demographics of school as you go and you see, there are more private schools, there are more homeschoolers. The demographics of what public schools and schools in general in South Carolina are changing, and I think that's one of the reasons that we're having this. I don't think that the legislature feels like that the high school league reflects that change, if I could kind of say it politely. But, I've got some examples and talked to folks, but certainly I know everybody wants to weigh in on this, so I'll push on that and see what everybody else has to say.
That's a brave assumption that everybody wants to weigh in on this because when it comes to that bill that's been proposed, and former Speaker Lucas, he can attest to this, that anytime a bill comes up in the legislature, yes, we've got a first draft of what it is. A lot of times those go through the meat grinder and you get things taken out, you get things added in, and as to why that bill was proposed, I cannot speculate on that. I prefer not to, and what happens under that copper dome on Gervais Street, that's what they decide, and all of us in this room will have to adjust accordingly, including myself and the South Carolina High School League.
And I would just add that certainly I had my 50th reunion last year, so it was 50 years since I've been in high school, but over the time of me being as principal and superintendent in schools, schools have changed. Schools are not the same as they were over the last 50 years. And since COVID in particular, you have many more homeschoolers. You have many more children going to private school. You have probably going to come up many more children going with choice across the state. And so you look at your demographics of your school. I know my school district's down 2,000 plus students. It's right rural. The urban districts are picking up, but the rural districts are not. And it's just a changing body. And to some extent, the high school league might not have changed with it. And that may be part of what's going on with this legislation. They want changes that are reflective of what parents are using as a vehicle for their child's education.
And let me say this too, that another, I don't want to call it problem, but I want to call it more of a progression, is that the high school league has changed, and it has changed because of legislation. So you look at the appellate process, I believe that's a legislative change. You look at private schoolers who don't have access to, say, football or tennis. I believe that was a legislative change. So again, it's almost, the legislature has forced several changes on the high school league by statute. And I don't want to say that this is a normal step, but you know, I guess you could kind of see it coming with what's gone on in the past, and the legislature has, you know, obviously dipped its hands into this. You know, I can tell you other things. It's from what I've heard and people I've talked to, and I certainly tried to prepare to get ready to come and talk to you all about this. You know, some of the smaller schools, I think, aren't necessarily as opposed to the change because they feel dominated a little bit by the larger school and the way it's structured. I pulled the bylaws off of the high school league off yesterday, and I wanted to read them because I really wanted to understand it. If I'm going to come talk to you about the high school league, I want to understand what the bylaws say. Now, I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing law 36 years. I couldn't understand what the bylaws said. So again, they're a little difficult to go through. I think when legislators try to do that, they see that, they want something that they can understand. And again, from the outside looking in, the high school league, again, you know, not under state government, which, you know, again, probably a good thing. But you know, they don't understand it. So if they don't understand it, then this is the next logical step. They've had to jump in already now a couple of times to change it. Now, maybe come in and control it. And, you know, I think there have been some decisions that have been made by the high school league about, you know, I don't want to get into different schools, but ineligible player at school X, and both of them were in school Y, and school X continued to be banned for the playoff. School Y was banned for the playoff. Well, you know, they changed their mind, and school Y got to go to the playoffs. School X didn't get to go to the playoffs. So that's the kind of things they're looking at. And, you know, they don't go to y'all. They go to their legislators to complain. You know, that's their constituency. There's some perceived unfairness out there with what's been happening with the high school league, fines that have been levied, fines that have been reduced. You know, again, those types of things are, I think, pushing what you're seeing in Columbia now.
And one thing that always comes up in our executive committee meetings that is super important, and it binds us legally, is one of the budget provisos that's in there. We always refer back to the proviso. And currently, that's how the South Carolina Legislature can insert themselves in the South Carolina High School League when they say, you know, these certain teams need to be treated, I mean, for good or bad, just like public schools, homeschoolers, or private school attendees, student athletes. If their school doesn't offer that sport, they're eligible to play within their district. And they make changes, and they add it on, they hang it like a Christmas tree ornament onto the budget, those little provisos. So if you really want to take a look, or if you hear us talking about in executive committee meetings, hey, we got to abide by the proviso, we've got to make this sure this is legal, that's what we're talking about, that budget proviso, providing the state budget.
That's exactly how they do it.
Yes, sir. Is that a simple way to put it?
That's
Hanging Christmas tree ornaments on it?
Well, again, it's a way they you know, jumped in and gotten into a matter that they wouldn't normally get into. That's how they do it. So, you know, they're tasked with education in this state, and the high school league is obviously an extension of that. And so, yeah, that's one of the way they do it. This is by bill. This is by bill that will essentially change everything that the high school league has done and has been doing, and it'll create an entirely new entity. And again, I call the old entity something from the ground up that schools created. This will be kind of top down that politics creates.
Would it be safe to say that this is potentially dangerous, being led by politics? You know, you could potentially lose lack of stability based upon whoever can mobilize the most agreements now writing the next bill. So we get this group right here that presented this bill, then you're going to get a counter. So then you get a counter group of representatives who's now writing the next bill, and you start getting into ping pong with legislating high school athletics.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that comes up, although there's always the potential, you know, to keep going down the road and changing the bill. Again, the concern for me is, and not for me, the concern I've heard, and I want to get Rainey to talk about this. You know, there's a strong push, and what the high school league does is great. It does it through athletics. It does it through mainly public schools. But that roadmap, that environment is rapidly changing in this state. And from what I've seen, you know, some of the decisions that I've seen made, it's again trying to perpetuate the system that I came up in and I played high school in, or my son is late as 2009 that he played in. I think what the bigger concern is how education is going to be administered in this state over the years, and how we need to change, because the focus, and I think that's what we're all here to talk about, the focus isn't necessarily now, hey, we want to keep football fair, or we want to keep tennis fair. We want to make sure every child in South Carolina gets a good education. And if the child can get a better education some other school because he's an athlete, you know, why is that necessarily such a bad thing? And I read the other day, and you can help me with this, about the one free transfer rule. that the high school league put into effect?
Well, I think that still has to be voted on by the member schools. That
Yeah.
was something the executive committee we brought up, last year.
Yeah,
I think trying to be proactive to a
Right.
potential school of choice build that may be passed, and, that still has to be approved by the membership, so
I
we'll see how that
understand,
goes.
I understand. But again, how, I guess how is that different now? And I understand we're dealing with high schoolers and not folks in college. And again, I'm not giving you my opinion. I like the high school league. High school league's never done anything to me, but you know, you can go to college now and play at 5 different schools in 5 years. And, you know, if you're getting a great education, that's what the focus, I think, is going to be. And Rainey can speak to that more than anybody. She's not just a superintendent. I mean, she's worked with the Education Oversight Committee. She works with Ellen Weaver. She's one of the best superintendents in the state of South Carolina. And Rainey, I kind of like for you to comment on that, because there's a shift that's occurred. And
It is a shift, and I kind of alluded to it earlier. It's one that's much different even when I left as superintendent. Many more children going back and forth, and there are a lot of different ways that children can even cross county lines. You earn $300 assessed value, property value, you can go to that district, and I'm sure you're aware of that rule. And so, you know, parents will look for a lot of different avenues for their child to have a better education. It may or may not be with, you know, that they think it's a better team in tennis or lacrosse or football or whatever else, but it's happening. And often you know, it's that squeaky wheel that gets the grease. And so a lot of times you'll, have parents that have concerns, and sometimes in reality, it may be related to sports and not as much related to education. But often it is related to the education, and the child is a mediocre tennis player. I mean, they're not going anywhere afterwards, but they want to be able to play when they transfer. And so I think, some of this bill might reflect that the high school league may or may not have changed enough with the times. And you mentioned you had it on a vote last year.
Yes, ma'am.
And we're now into this year. So, I mean, that's something that maybe could have happened quicker. I don't know how y'all's rules are, but they do want things to move at a faster pace. And I think, I can just tell you, it's just a very different landscape out there with parents. And the legislature really wants parents to have a greater role in the education of their child, which then may have an effect on its athletics.
Rainey, let me.
Can I help out? Can I help in a second? I think we want to, let me help clean up some perspective here a little bit.
Okay.
My name is Pearson. I am, oh man.
He's out of his meeting.
Sorry. I was not in my meeting. I was in the executive committee meeting just now, and for those that don't know me, I'm the president of the executive committee. So thank y'all so much. I know Ms. Knight.
Yes, sir.
I know you. Anyway, I grew up in Darlington. That's why I know Ms. Knight.
Okay.
But nevertheless, the thing is, the rule did pass.
Nick.
I'm Nick.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm Nick. Sorry, you know Nick.
So the rule did pass. So we did get that transfer rule taken care of. And I think the timing is always of essence. And the thing that somewhat hinders us from making constitutional rule changes is because the membership runs the league. And we have a process in place where we do put some things in place every now and then in the executive committee to kind of get us to the legislative assembly so we can make it part of the bylaws and constitution. But this year, we did pass a transfer rule that's kind of coexists with what we see that the legislators were going to propose. The reason why we made that change, and I feel like the membership did a good job in doing so, because what was proposed was more or less, for lack of a better term, a free-for-all, where there wasn't any restrictions, no guardrails on it, and it was going to lose a little bit of that equity amongst the private schools, charter schools, and the public schools. So at some point, say, well, who's going to protect the public schools if we stop making accommodation for all the private schools, right? We stop making accommodation for all the charter schools. So we felt like we had a good subcommittee together, and they did great work, and they came up with a good concept, and we took it to the membership, and the membership tweaked it, and made some adjustments to it. I think we landed on something that's going to be pretty good moving forward, that's going to accommodate both groups. in a sense. It's going to accommodate some of the legislators as well. So there is a transfer policy in place, but also there's some guardrails that kind of make some of the principals and superintendents and, you know, some of the ADs feel a little more comfortable about it because now they know there's some kind of guardrails in it. I'll be the first to say I don't think it's perfect. I think that it's still a moving target, but I think we're moving in the right direction to try to meet the need of some of the legislators and meet the need of what the transition is in public education. So.
Y'all have, Hayfall from Northwestern, y'all have spoken about the reason for the bill in the House. We had we were able to go to the State House this past weekend, privileged enough to go, and I spoke to my representatives there, and their basic message was they're trying to change the leadership at the top of the high school league. They're using this as kind of a chip to, hey, we don't like what's going on at the very top, the commissioner. We're trying, that's what was told to me personally by these representatives. Have y'all seen that, and have you seen that in your time there where a bill is proposed just to try to get some movement in an organization that they don't control in order to scare the, you know what I mean, like as used as a scare saying, we don't like this guy.
Yeah.
We're going to propose this, which is obviously worse than what's going on. We like the high school league, but we're trying to remove this one guy, so this is a bill that's proposed. And y'all need to figure this out, or else we're going to figure it out.
Yeah, so not speaking to this bill, but have I ever seen a bill that was put in to send a message and to not get passed? I mean, I was there 25. I was there 25 years. Absolutely. Yeah.
Jared Caldwell from Chester High School. Quick question. One of the things that you referenced kind of speed and getting things done, direction. I'm not overly familiar with the kind of the bill process, but is there like a consideration or thought about kind of the impact disproportionately, whether it's demographics, geographic region, that if a bill in fact presented is passed, how does that affect those just other than the constituents that seem to have the loudest mic at the moment?
Well, I'm glad to talk about demographics, and I want Rainey to talk about demographics. And hey, I'm from Northeast South Carolina, right? That ain't Northwest South Carolina where they got all the population and a lot of the tax base and a lot of the money. So Dr. Knight was a district superintendent at a district that was not an affluent district, but we were fourth in the state under your leadership. So that was really good. What I'm seeing, and that's a really good question, demographics. So when you look at pre-COVID and post-COVID and different areas of the state, so you got a lot of things going on. One, does anybody know in net population terms what the fastest growing state in America is? It's South Carolina. It's South Carolina. And it's a lot of retirees. I'm not sure if there are a lot of people, there are some.
There's some
who have school-age children. But let's talk about the Darlington County School District. Darlington County School District, pre-COVID, had 11,000 people. Now we're under 9. Is that it? So when you talk about demographics, numbers equal power, okay? And so we know where the numbers are in South Carolina. If you got 9,000 students in your district, would you consider that a very powerful district with a very strong voice?
Not compared to the other districts out there. I mean, you got Greenville, you got Horry, you got Chester, you got Charleston, you got Beaufort, you got Aiken, you got Spartanburg's all you 9. If anybody from Spartanburg, although you're 7, you kind of act as one. But it's one where, like Darlington, we had fewer young people moving to Darlington, meaning childbearing age women to move in Darlington. Very few families. It is, 75% of the people in Darlington County don't have children in school. And I always say that to people, like when we go out for a bond referendum, they have no idea what's going on in schools, including, I don't have any, he doesn't have any. And so we like a lot of districts, and I imagine Chester Marlboro, Lee, I got, you know, keep Dillon, Colleton, Williamsburg, Florence one is different, but some of the outstanding Florence districts, they're going to start losing population just by natural attrition of students graduating out. Partly because we don't have industry, and hopefully, you know, each district will try to do their best to bring industry in, bring manufacturing in, bring places for people to work. But it's going towards these more suburban and urban areas. I mean, it's a very different demographic shift across South Carolina.
And for instance, look just up the road in Indian Land. 10 years ago, a 1A high school. Now they're on the cusp of being one of the biggest 5A high schools. So when you talk about areas growing, that's growing quick.
Yeah. So when we did, that's a good point. So when we did reapportionment, to show you where the population is going, we had to create 4 new house districts. You know, one was in Greenville, one I think was in the lower part of the state. You have 2 new house districts created side by side in Lancaster County, South Carolina. And I want to get back to your point. There's always strength in numbers. I mentioned Jackie Hayes, who's one of my dear friends. He is from Dillon. You know, he's opposed to the bill, but he represents Dillon. Every 10 years, in the rural area, his district gets bigger and bigger and bigger. In these more urban areas in northwest South Carolina, down on the coast, those districts get smaller and smaller and smaller. So, you know, so rural representatives who may be inclined not to support this bill are disappearing in the legislature. So that, again, that's one factor. Again, I go back though to the second factor is I think the high school league, the arguments I'm hearing, not my argument, may have been a little slow in dealing with private school issues, homeschool issues, those other types of issues, and those issues aren't going away. We're not going to have a groundswell of folks going to the public school just because we're getting more people. Rainey, you know the statistics more than I do. Do we have more homeschoolers now?
For sure. Minimal.
Yeah.
Minimal.
Yeah. How about private schools?
Minimal.
Yeah.
And then when school choice comes up, it's another avenue.
What's the breakdown between public, private charter right now, student population?
All right, when you say private charter, most charters are public.
Well, say
Okay.
charter schools, put charter and private together, and just regular public schools. What's the number breakdown?
I mean, I'd have to give you a number. It's definitely more. I think I sent you a number the other day, Jay. It was like 700-something thousand children.
In public school.
But that includes charter, because charters are public. You've got a few charters that are private, but very few. The numbers are proportionally smaller, but they're growing. I would never believe there's many homeschool children in my district. That's what I see. You know, it's just growing.
So why does Darlington County fall from 11,000 people to under 9,000 people?
Homeschoolers, private schools. And I will say charter school, because there are 2 or 3 online charter schools. All they do is online. They do it from home.
Real quick, Brian Rick from Camden High School. I'm a little nervous with all these red foxes up here on the way to the floor. Do you guys, the legislator, know the status of this bill? Has it already passed the House? How much does it need to get enacted by passing the Senate? Because it dissolves the high school league. It also opens up a transfer portal period, right, for school of choice 2 times a year, things like that. Y'all have any idea where it is?
I can tell you where I think it is. I don't think it's passed either body yet. I think it's still in the House Education Committee, and I think there will be hearings on that bill. So, you know, I know what happened at Hartsville High School. Some of the folks who signed on the bill that you know cover that district, they call them and say, listen, we like the high school league. So that, get in touch with your legislator, let them know how you feel. Listen, I got great respect for Camden. Jim Neal was, not in 1975, I remember I played tight end, I went out and hit him, and I thought he had literally killed me. And he didn't even know I was standing there. So, Camden is a great school, but again, Camden and Hartsville are a lot alike. And they will feel the same way about a lot of issues pertaining to education. But no, I think it's earlier in the process rather than later in the process.
Mr. Speaker, we're in a 2-year.
Yeah, we're in a 2-year legislative session too. So generally, if something doesn't move the first year, it's really tough if there's opposition to it to make it move in the second year. And there's a number of reasons for that. One, there are a lot of bills on the calendar. And two, it's an election year, and nobody likes to do anything controversial in an election year. So this is the year, and that's a really good question, by the way. This is the year, I think, if you see movement, you'll know if it has a realistic chance of doing this. And back to your point, if we see real movement, I think we'll know if it's something that people are serious about or if it's just a shot across the bow, which is also good.
And that's my understanding as well, that it's still in committee.